Coming to you from the dining room table at East Barbary Lane, welcome to another special episode of Full Circle, the podcast. I am so thrilled to be sitting down with our guest today. We've got another creative in the house, y'all. If you recall our interview with Giuliani Tavares, who was working with Children's Theater Company, you'll know that our guest today is a big deal. He is a playwright and he is working on directing a wonderful new play called Drawing Lessons. And we're going to have a little talk about that and art and being fabulous in the art sphere. Jack Tamburri is in the house. Hi, Jack. How are you?
Hi, Charles. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you. How are things?
Things are good. I am here in the Twin Cities. I am in residence at Children's Theater Company for the creation of this project. We are 3.5 weeks into rehearsal, and it's going great. I'm having a wonderful time.
Fabulous. So tell me the play is called Drawing Lessons. Is that correct?
Yes, so this play is called Drawing Lessons, and it was created by my collaborator, Michi Baral, who is the playwright, and I am directing this world premiere production. It was commissioned by CTC here in Minneapolis in partnership with Ma Yi Theater Company in New York. Michi and I both live in New York and have been working on this project for close to 2 years now, and it's finally getting on its feet.
Nice. Tell us a little bit about what the play is about.
The play is about Kate, who is a 12-year-old girl in the year 1995 in Minneapolis, and it covers her 6th grade school year. And Kate is a young person who experiences anxiety and who finds herself incapable of speaking in public. This puts her in conflict with the kids around her who think she's weird, with her teachers who think she's not paying attention, and the way Kate manages her anxiety is by doodling compulsively. And early in the play, Kate encounters a curmudgeonly cartoonist named Paul, who is a professional who's got a daily comic strip in the paper, if you remember newspapers. And Paul gives Kate the titular drawing lessons, and she starts to develop her identity as an artist and comes out of her shell in that way.
I love it. Sounds like something I can relate to at my age. So, you know, that whole I'm not relating to other people, and creativity is the conduit.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot about my own experience as someone who felt like an artist, wanted to be an artist, felt called to be expressive, also as a gay kid. There's a lot that I relate to in this story as well.
I was going to say, I'm sure, because the play is loosely derived from a graphic novel. Did I read that right?
Actually, the other way around. The play is inspired by a number of middle grade graphic novels, of which there's been a proliferation really since the early 2000s. It sort of takes the form of a graphic novel on stage, as it were. And I can talk about what that actually means visually. But the story is unique to Michi. It originates with Michi, and we've been developing it from scratch.
Fascinating. So how much of your own experience are you able to draw from as inspiration for some of the choices that you make?
Yeah. So the character of Kate, a big part of her story is that she's biracial. She is Korean American, and she's being raised by a single dad. And none of that is in my experience.
Really?
And yeah. And I was a kid who was really, really into comics, and not just Marvel superheroes, although that was a big part of it.
Same.
But I found my way into independent comics, the history of cartooning, particularly the history of the development of newspaper strips in America, going back to the early 20th century with the Yellow Kid and Nemo in Slumberland, all this sort of nerdy stuff that I was really compelled by as a teenager. So, but I'm also a kid who I loved to draw until I didn't. And there's a moment, probably around 12, around the age that our character is, when, for whatever reason, based on whatever feedback I was getting, I determined I am not good at this, therefore I don't do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't know what that feels like.
I think that's something that people experience, particularly with visual art, with drawing. But I think that's also an experience that young people have with all sorts of activities that they enjoy, and then at some moment there's a determination that you don't have the talent, as it were, and you can't pursue this professionally. Right. There's just something that shuts off if you are not if you don't receive a certain kind of external feedback, and it takes a pretty
you create it with the little voice in the back of your head.
Yeah, and it takes a pretty grounded young person to move through that and to say, oh, but I enjoy this, so I'm going to keep doing it because I enjoy it. I think that voice for most young people is pretty underdeveloped.
Yes.
And I had an experience in about 2008 with the cartoonist and teacher Linda Barry. Linda Barry is a legend of independent comics from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And for a couple decades, she's been teaching cartooning and creative expression at University of Wisconsin. And I was living in Chicago at the time. And I did a workshop with her based on her pedagogy. She has an extraordinary book called What It Is, where she really lays out her proposal that everyone can draw. Everyone has a line that is unique to them. And everyone can draw in the context of cartooning. Now, naturalistic figure drawing with perspective, there's skill and tricks and tools and training involved in that. That's a different story. But when it comes to getting your expressive line on the page to tell your story, that's an experience. It's like cabaret. Cartooning is the people's medium, right? And truly anyone can do it. You just have to unlearn the idea that you can't.
Okay.
And so Linda Barry's pedagogy consists of all of these prompts and exercises, some of which are writing prompts, some of which are memory prompts, some of which are sort of silly drawing prompts, some of which are meditations that get you, that silence your judge and get you to the place where you're just putting marks on the page because in whatever way feels good.
Silence your judge, man. That's a shirt.
Stitch that on a pillow.
Yes, because that's one of the biggest obstacles with, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, all budding artists of whatever genre, like giving yourself the permission to be bad at the thing.
I'm 41 years old. I have been a professional theater director for 20-ish years. I have advanced training. I have a master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
That voice remains one of the most prominent in my internal landscape, right? I'm at a place where I can call myself a professional artist, and I am still negotiating with that judge every day of my work.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I'm the same way. I was a professional choreographer in another life. And it's like, if I didn't already know that I was good, there would be days when I'm like, why not just hang it up now? Because this right here, this sucks.
And obviously everyone around me understands that I don't belong here.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. And they're going to find out any minute, and they're going to let me know, and they're going to kick me out, and they're going to take back every bit of praise and money they've ever given. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And meanwhile, in that room full of your artistic collaborators, every single one of them
Is
is
going
having
through
that
the
same
exact. Yeah,
conversation
yeah,
with
yeah.
their own. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And once you make that realization, well, it doesn't really help, but it helps.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
true. It's true. I love it. So talk to me about, because I know for me, and this is something that I didn't realize until later in life, my queer identity directly influenced my creativity, but I think I was discovering my creativity as a way, as a workaround for admitting things. I don't know. Talk to me a little bit about, I guess, your journey in that aspect.
You just said something that hit real deep. I
Uh
just need
huh.
to take a moment with that. Woo! Um, so for myself, you know, I discovering the work of queer artists, particularly queer artists who were gay men. Um, I'm thinking about Tennessee Williams. I'm thinking
Mm.
about the films of Todd Haynes. I'm thinking about well, I don't sue me, Morrissey and the Smiths. And these things that at that time,
Right. Yeah.
a sensibility. I encountered a sensibility that a part of me recognized and a part of me was inspired by, and it gave me access to a world that felt like it could be a birthright
Mm.
and a way of expressing myself that was specific and that I wasn't seeing in other works of art that I respected and was moved and inspired by, but this there's a world that felt specific. And when I think about coming of age, I was about our character Kate's age at that time. I'm 1 year older than Kate. So in 1995-96, I was in 7th grade. But when I think about
You are such a baby.
being in middle and high school in the late 90s, that period uh, of gay history, especially growing up in suburban New Jersey, in the sort of orbit of New York City.
Mm.
Obviously, the AIDS epidemic looms very large
Oh yeah.
in that moment, and a sort of an absence of elders.
Yes.
I don't think there's no way I could have articulated this at the time, but um, a real absence of a kind of opportunity for mentorship, of invitations into the world, except through these documents, right? Except through these artworks. That in a way where young gay people who live in and near places like New York City, prior to 1981, had opportunities for contact
Right.
in a way that my generation didn't.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
and so and so yeah, I'm not sure if I'm getting a little far afield of the question you asked, but
I mean,
this
it's
is where it's
all,
sending me.
yeah, because as Martha is fond of saying, it's like, we need to be reverent of our queer elders because we don't have a lot of gay 70-year-olds walking around,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's
Yeah.
major.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
major part of our
And
collective history.
it was very important to me and to Michi, when we were crafting this world. A very, very early idea in the development of this play was that the mentor Kate encounters, this cartoonist Paul, is a gay man, is an out gay man living in partnership with his partner. They are active members of their community, and they are thriving in a simple way, and that's simply a part of the landscape of Kate's world. And that was important to me for a couple reasons. I think, frankly, in 2024 there's a political value to representing a space controlled by these gay men, which is their art shop that they run, where Kate meets them and where Kate continues to return to receive her lessons, as a space that is safe for this child. And in fact, a space that is emotionally safer for her than school, than her father's workplace, even than her home. Because as teenagers, those aren't always the safest spaces. And, you know, I'm not necessarily talking about abusive situations. I'm just talking about for emotional development and for your exploration and discovery of the world around you.
There's expectations around you. There's agendas around you. There's Exactly. And so for Kate to find her garden for her own emotional well-being in the space of these men felt like an image I was proud to put on stage and felt useful to put on stage for a young and intergenerational audience. Nice.
And then there's also, I think, tell me what you think about this. Okay, this is something I'm working on. I have this perception that for young people today, the history of sort of identity politics discourse and representations of life as marginalized people kind of starts in the summer of 2020.
Say more words.
There's this profound moment at that time, right? Where in the context of a global pandemic, American culture is experiencing this heightened, inflamed reckoning with the realities of institutional racism and state violence against all sorts of marginalized people, particularly Black people, and a discourse, a set of discursive tools, a language about that becomes popularized.
Okay.
And all sorts of people have access to it, particularly young people. Young people are excited about it, hungry for it, become facile with it really, really quickly. And, you know, I'm also an educator. I teach at SUNY Purchase, which is a particular place. It's an art school outside of New York. It's been the gayest place in Westchester since the 1970s. So maybe I'm in a bubble where my students are particularly...
That's saying something.
My students are particularly sort of facile with this discourse. But I guess what I mean is I want to make it clear to young people that gay people have been thriving, have found ourselves in community with the people around us, and have made lives for ourselves like the whole time.
Right.
And that, you know, the 20th century was, the late 20th century was not necessarily a period of sort of medieval state repression. Or
although it might have felt like it.
Yeah. I think, you know, the lived experience of people in that time was of, okay, this is my context, and there are ways in which I need to account for my own safety. And there are limits there are external boundaries being placed on various ways in which I can move safely in society. And that is a problem for me. And also within that, I make my life. You know, I don't move through the world, you know, with my head down, feeling the weight of all of the shackles upon me as I walk down the street, right? I have a life. I'm in community with my neighbors. I have fulfillment. I have my career. I relate to, you know,
right.
I think that I think that there can be an overstating of, just because this language is now popularized doesn't mean that we were absent any tools whatsoever prior to it. And in fact, not for nothing, the language itself was certainly already active in academic and activist circles for decades.
Definitely.
You know, it just wasn't, children weren't saying it, and now they are.
That part. Well, right. Because, yeah, these conversations were definitely being had. I think
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact that, in 2020, when we were all forced to sit down and pull ourselves out of ourselves, we suddenly became privy to conversations that we're already having. So they might have felt like, for some people, it felt like it was new to them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, no, welcome to the party. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And definitely a lot of awakenings happened. People got mad, like for the first time, even,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of relationships were born, strengthened, weakened, and broken all around the
Mm-hmm.
same conversations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was definitely a big cultural shift in terms of thought and activism and quote unquote identity politics. Definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the more I think about this, the more I think the shift was primarily discursive. It wasn't necessarily like the ship of our society didn't change direction all that much. We just talk about it in this new way that's more sophisticated on a wide scale.
Right. Right. Yeah. A lot more people came out to themselves, to each
Mm-hmm.
other, because when all you have is yourself,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
you take that time to
Yeah.
answer those questions that you didn't have the time
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
answer
Yeah.
before.
And I think when I think about sort of the mid '90s, the period of this play, because there's also um, part of the landscape of this play is that Kate is biracial. She's a person of color. Her father is an immigrant. The classmates with whom she connects most directly are immigrants or the children of immigrants and are children of color. And there's, um, you know, it's actually been really sort of delightful to try to paint a picture for our audience of like the multiculturalism era, the sort of uh, an era of a mainstream identity politics that was attempting to be inclusive but did not fundamentally include a real analysis of power.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that those attempts at inclusivity were necessarily going to fall short, be incomplete, and even continue to be harmful.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, yeah, because and it's interesting that it's set against the backdrop of the 90s because that definitely feels comfortable for me because we're like on opposite ends of the same decade in terms of
Mm-hmm.
age. So I was in high school for the very beginning of the 90s and then in college for the remainder. Um, it took me 7 years to get my 4-year degree.
Sure.
And,
I,
that entire time, like the amount of multicultural, I was a multicultural sponge, just because
mm-hmm.
like my high school, where it was located, it was this hub for all these other schools. So I had Vietnamese friends and Italian friends and black friends, and then get to college and like that's exponentially growing on top of the culture of the 90s, the zeitgeist of the 90s. And we had this rebellious nature, like, I'm gonna befriend this person because my mother wouldn't like it, and I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
this person because my daddy won't like it, and that's who I am, and I'm in your face. And there was still a very, very real danger attached to being that open and proud and public with your identity.
Mm-hmm.
So that rebellious nature was there, that political nature was there, but we also recognized that we were not the ones in power, and that was
Mm-hmm.
also fed into that rebellious nature. And because we didn't have social media to connect us with folks like us, we'd realize how not unique we actually are. But we had this very like insular community mindset, and I think that fed into that. The chosen family was huge. For whatever reason, be that, you're finally getting out of your suburban, like homogenous upbringing for the first time, or you're able to like have a queer family. That idea of chosen family and identity becomes major. And so I get that. That's the 90s. So I get it.
Yeah, a strand that we're working on in this play is like Kate's well-meaning white social studies teacher, right? And the ways in which her attempts at a sort of celebratory multiculturalism are not serving these students, these children from immigrant families, these children of culture, of color, excuse me. And
same thing.
Yeah. Sure. So yeah. And I think the way right. None of these 1995 12-year-olds are going to be articulating chosen family as a concept, the way that even maybe 12-year-olds today might have access to.
Right.
But that's exactly what they're doing when they clock each other and say, "Oh, I feel different from everyone else, and I kind of feel like you do too." And by everyone else, I mean this majority white room.
Right.
And so, like, maybe we have something in common where we can be safe with each other and can thrive with each other and can cultivate something among ourselves that is healthful.
Yeah, you mentioned the well-meaning social studies teacher, and like the first thing I thought of is like, yes, let's celebrate everyone's differences by pointing them out.
Right. And sort of the reduction of power relations and histories of violence to a food fair.
Yes. Yes. Distill like the history of your family, like fleeing a war-torn country by whom, what do you have for dinner? What's on that cracker?
Yeah. All the kids point and laugh at you at lunchtime, but on this special day of the year, we'll gather in the cafeteria and celebrate your cultural heritage.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because like growing up with so many Asian friends and realizing like that whole thing that, Margaret Cho makes a joke about it. She's like, when I'm in school, I'm in America, but then when I go home to a foreign land, and I low key like was jealous of that because, spoke English outside the house, spoke English inside the house. It's like, we're kind of boring compared to you, realizing that, all the angst that goes with that feeling different and feeling other. And it's an interesting thing to see from the outside. And I like that duality, that idea of like the discomfort with the duality.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
It's I always kind of wish that we spoke a different language at home, but
Yeah.
Southern English doesn't count.
I'm white. I'm corny white, and
white.
Yes. I have moved through the world as a white man my whole life. I've been given all sorts of space and permission and access as a result of that, and I feel very, very lucky that that being gay gave me an opportunity to get a clue about anything.
This is true. Yeah.
And I want to be careful in how I talk about this, right? Because it's not permission. It's not an abnegation of privilege. All of that is still very much in place.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see the bullshit
Mm-hmm.
at a young age. I got to clock something and say, oh, that's preposterous.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not how people should be treated. And that's not how I should be treated. And perhaps that's not how I should treat anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Like especially in the 90s, you know, pre social media, pre internet, pre grinder where you can order men like pizza. You know, it's like that being gay, being queer for a lot of white folks was your taste of being other. And you know, you would find yourself in groupings of people that you otherwise might not have because we have this thing in common.
Yeah. When would I have had meaningful opportunities for deep encounters with folks of color outside of gay community?
Right.
I think about this a lot. My high school is pretty diverse, and it also was structured with racist academic tracking.
Uh-huh.
So like there were kids of all sorts all around me, except in my actual classes.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so, it really, yeah.
That's an interesting conversation that I never really, yeah, because, you know, there is definitely a class structure within the LGBT community. If we're talking, if you introduce the element of race, and you know,
I mean, right.
it's a whole
let's,
thing.
Yeah, let's not say that gay male community is a racial utopia.
Shit. I will not.
But I think a lot about Samuel Delaney, the writer, has I'm going to butcher this, but there's he wrote a book. It's sort of half memoir, half sort of really academic sort of treatise called Times Square Red, Times Square Blue that I read in my 20s and is something that I really hold to my heart, where he proposes that essentially that cruising is a sort of profound and vital aspect of human culture, because especially within capitalism, because it's one of the only spaces where people of different class backgrounds have an opportunity to encounter one another outside of the rules of transaction. Now, is cruising or gay bars or are those in fact a transaction?
I was getting ready to say now.
I think there's plenty of transaction going on, but I think, I mean, at its most basic, like, you know, really literal dumb sort of reality of my encounters with folks of a class background that's different from me. Either I'm serving them something, they're buying something from me, I'm being served, I'm buying something from them, like transaction in its most sort of obvious broad sense. That's like 90% of interclass contact,
right,
in most places in the United States. And something about queer space creates potential for something more meaningful.
Definitely. The problem arises when, let's see, how can I put this? When the marginalized of the marginalized seek safe spaces, right? And then, you know, I guess I'm trying to say is like the problem comes in when you have the gay white men with money,
Who are bringing class hierarchy into the space.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I was like, let me get to the short part of that.
Sure.
Right, because
absolutely.
But
yeah,
it's all kumbaya
I
until the cops show up sometimes.
Yeah, I think the proposal of a space that simply doesn't, in and of its nature, have to adhere to sort of rules of spaces of buying and selling more sort of explicitly or formally. I think perhaps this is more about potential than about actual qualities.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes. All right, I'm going to turn this wheel a little bit. So
Great.
Going back, as fascinating as this is, but we can go.
Oh, you mean my children's show?
Right. Hey, I love that we can go from A to Q.
Absolutely.
As it were. But when we were talking earlier about queer kids not necessarily being able to have that mentor, that societal mentor. And then I was thinking about comic books. I'm a comic book nerd. I got this image of like, how in Marvel Comics there's like that nexus of realities. Like the idea that I had was like, there's this like
the one guarded by the man thing.
Right. Okay. Look at you. But there's this idea of like all the collective queer fabulousness, let's say, like all the creativity, all the aesthetic superiority, as it were, like is concentrated into this well that can be tapped into. There's a story in there somewhere. Like I was going on this whole like comic book nerd thing. Like every queer person that ever was, that is, that ever will be, contributes to this font, and it's something to be tapped into. I don't know. It was in my head and I had to get it out.
I think there's something really cool there. I think because I think there is something distinct about queerness as an identity category, right? I think unlike the way racialized identities are assigned by society according to biological lineage, queerness, I think, similar to disability in a way, is assigned according to something that isn't necessarily handed down in family structures.
Okay.
Right. And so there is the entrance into queer community, queer family, queer lineage. It can be through contact. It can be through, and it certainly can be through family, right? But it's not de facto. And I think so this idea of sort of the well of queer culture that I was saying before, encountering Oscar Wilde, Tennessee Williams, Todd Haynes, and drinking from the well,
right,
was my entry point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's when you say those names, I feel like the name that's missing is Gregoraki.
Ooh. Ooh. Oh, thank you for saying that. Say that name again.
Gregoraki. Oh my goodness.
I'm trying to was it Doom Generation or Nowhere? One of them I saw. I was probably 17, rented the video, watched it, said, "What the hell am I looking at? I want more, but I'm terrified. This movie gave me homework."
That was me at 23. I can't imagine 17.
And no, it took me well into my 30s to even think about going back and being like, "Oh wait, what was this guy on about? Maybe I have more context for this now." It was actually my sister who was like, "Mysterious Skin, that's the way. Check out
Yes.
Mysterious, and that's definitely a more accessible entry point to then go back into the earlier stuff. And
Because that's
now
more of a
I
film
mean,
in the way that we understand film to be, as
mm-hmm,
opposed to
mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm.
craziness that came before.
Yeah. Uh, a friend of mine suggested Mysterious Skin was him going, wait, did you guys think I couldn't do this?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I can. I was just choosing not to because this is yeah. Um, anyway, I actually just rewatched Nowhere a few weeks ago, and man, just the truth and the beauty
I was
all over those movies.
thinking of going back and rewatching the trilogy. And Nowhere is like Gregoraki at his Gregorackiest, I think.
Yeah. He said, "Oh, are y'all still with me? All right, now we're going over the cliff." Yeah.
The ending.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
I just remember like laughing until like tears were streaming down my eyes and falling out of my chair and having to stop the video,
Yeah.
then back it up and watch it again, repeat.
Yeah. Yep.
So what do we say? We said Oscar Wilde, Tennessee Williams, Todd Haynes,
Todd Haynes. Yeah.
Gregoraki. That's a soup.
It is. Yeah. And actually, I got to Todd Haynes through Oscar Wilde. Because I was a good little book learning boy, and so it was the sort of the classical gaze were sort of my first, and then I don't know how I made the connection, but somehow Oscar Wilde, Arrow, Velvet Goldmine, and I don't know if it was a magazine article or I don't know what it was, but then.
Right. See, for me, okay, so again, if we're talking books, then I want to add into that mix Poppy Z. Bright.
Okay.
Are you familiar at all?
That's a name that is ringing a bell, but that's not in my my immediate.
Hey all, Charles here. I am breaking into this interview because I need to make a quick clarification. You just heard me say the name Poppy Z. Bright and how they are one of my favorite authors, and that is still true. However, in the process of editing this very episode, I learned that the author has transitioned. His name is William Joseph Martin, or as he prefers, Billy Martin. And that is something that I just found out. And so did you, assuming you didn't already know. Unfortunately, what that means is you're going to hear me talk about him using old information. So I'm going to be using she and her pronouns and saying woman. I didn't know, but now I do. And I just wanted you to know that I know. And Billy, I just want you to know that I know. Also, you are definitely one of my favorite authors, and I would love to be able to sit and talk to you. Okay, back to the episode. Poppy Z. Bright is a queer woman author from New Orleans. And a lot of her stuff, like she's primarily like a horror writer. But she writes some of the best queer characters that you want to like meet or be. But then if you actually did, you might run from them.
Sure. And I'll fully cop that, I wasn't looking for women or finding women in my path until a point in college where I was like, oh, boy, do I have a blind spot. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair. I mean, I found out a friend of mine who is my bestie, she was a huge Poppy Z. Bright fan. She turned me on to her work. And, she gave me the synopsis of, I think it was Exquisite Corpse. And I don't think I really knew that Poppy Z. Bright was a woman yet.
Okay.
I just ran face first into the bookstore, like, where is this book? So yeah, I definitely
Nice.
recommend because
Great.
yeah,
Great.
if you like
Thank
Gregor
you.
Rocky,
Okay. Excellent. That sounds right up my alley. I appreciate it.
look at this. I see your Oscar Wilde and I raise you.
Love that.
Well then, okay. So would you say that those names that we mentioned, those are like your major influences, or like who haven't
I
we
mean,
mentioned yet?
influences. I mean, influences on my life, my sensibility, um, the way I approach theater making. Sure, yeah,
Okay.
um, but I mean, yeah, I would say that those names, those were the names that were hitting me at a very particular moment in my development as a person, as a gay person, and as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, in conversation with all of that is the world of comics, is the I mean the Jack Kirby and the
Mm.
J.M. DeMatteis Spider-Man stuff, and the Chris Claremont X-Men, and Art Spiegelman's Mouse, and weird stuff I would find in strange bookstores by Ivan Brunetti and Daniel Clowes, and I
How about Johnny
which
Vasquez?
oh,
We got to hang out.
oh
We have too much in
you
common.
no, you keep saying these names that like unlock a door in my memory palace. I Johnny the Homicidal Maniac
Thank you.
was a really big deal to me.
Yeah.
There's a whole sort of proto goth strand
Mm-hmm.
that I got to again as a book learning boy. I got to through Anne Rice, because that was I was
Mm-hmm.
in. I was actually telling a friend this the other day. I was walking around sixth grade in a T-shirt I got from Sam Goody that had Brad Pitt's face on the front, and on the back it said "Drink from me and live forever."
Work.
And I had
Which
not
has
seen that
layers.
movie. I was not permitted to see that movie at that time, but I sure had read those books.
Uh-huh.
So yeah,
I
yeah.
still haven't forgiven that movie for giving Brad Pitt's character a whole wife. I'm sorry, what?
um, I maintain that Kirsten Dunst in that movie is like an all-time top 5 film performance, period.
Accurate. Yeah.
What she does at her age, unbelievable.
I think I followed her throughout the rest of her career because I was waiting for her to do that again.
Yeah. And she's done other really cool things, and I'm a fan, and I love her project choices. Maybe even more than I like her performances, actually. Like, I think she's in really good stuff.
Yes.
But that performance is a landmark. Yeah.
That's kind of how I look at at Keanu Reeves. Like, the project choices that he makes. Like, we can have a separate conversation about his performance in those things, but the projects he chooses to attach himself to have always been very, very interesting.
A writer I followed on the internet once, quite deftly proposed, Keanu Reeves is very good at creating space for the actors around him to work.
Mm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That is, yeah. That was a good way to put that. Yeah.
And not for nothing, there's often very good performances happening opposite Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
And there may actually be something to that in terms of a consistency that he is in fact responsible for.
Right, because here's the thing, and from what I've gleaned, because I was low-key fascinated by him throughout the 90s, like, on screen.
Oh, wait, the handsomest man on earth, you were fascinated?
I mean, duh. But forgetting the fact that on screen he can look like, the walking embodiment of duh, but like he's really one of the smartest people ever. So that dichotomy always attracts me, and I think that's why he was so perfect for Neo, because Neo was always in a constant state of whoa. So that was just
you know, just to get into the Tinseltown of it all. Apparently, a legendary mensch, like truly great to his collaborators.
Yeah, like, and considering like all the horrible things that he's been through, he's so kind and thoughtful and altruistic, and now we've turned into a We Love Keanu Reeves podcast.
Yeah. Keanu Reeves, we think you're a good person on this podcast.
I said a long time ago, I want to be best friends with Keanu Reeves just so that I can call him Kiki. Keeks for short.
Ooh, that would be extremely satisfying.
Yo, Keeks, what's up? Like, I just want to do that one time. Now, how the hell did we get here?
Kirsten Dunst's Interview with the Vampire, 6th grade goth.
Johnny the Homicidal Maniac.
Thank you.
I did that. Yes. Okay.
Yes. So this children's show I'm directing in Minneapolis.
Right. These are the kind of conversations I love. Where it's like we'll tee it up over here. We're playing a nice game of what do you tee things up with golf, t-ball.
Yeah.
And then over here we're playing like tiddlywinks, and we don't know how we got there, but it's okay.
And not for nothing, I think it's pretty cool and sophisticated that Children's Theater Company, a major regional theater focused on producing work for intergenerational audiences, has connected me to you and to this podcast, and that this is the conversation we're having in the landscape of a communications plan about this play.
Children's
I think
Theater
that's really cool.
Yeah, Children's Theater Company has a 100% success rate of providing fabulous individuals and conversations for Full Circle, the podcast. I will say that.
Awesome. I think that rules. I think this podcast as a platform for that institution to get its word out is thrilling.
Right.
And it makes a lot of sense to me.
It's totally become, they bring us people and like, we feel this person is interesting. We want to talk to them. And we're at the point where we're just like, yes, we would. Come on, send them.
Cool.
We trust you.
Cool.
One question I did want to ask you in the randomness of it all. So if you were to put together 5 artists that were to provide the soundtrack of your creative life, who would they be?
Are we talking specifically musical artists, or do we mean soundtrack in a more abstract way?
I was specifically thinking music, but now you done went and expanded the question. So
no. Let's stick with music.
Okay.
All right. 5. Oh, you're killing me. Okay. Here we go. Just say it. Let's say I'm gonna be a basic ass white 40-year-old and say Radiohead.
Okay.
Because the artistry is inarguable. Sorry.
Didn't hear me argue.
All right. We're going to go Radiohead.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go Liz Phair.
Okay.
We're going to go Outkast.
Okay.
We're going to go Nick Cave.
Okay.
And I think if I'm being honest in my heart, I have to say the word Morrissey again.
That was very specific. Okay. And that does paint a picture. I see you.
Okay. Great.
I love it. All right. So getting back to the play, please tell our audience where and when.
Yes. Drawing lessons is performing at Children's Theater Company in South Minneapolis, Minnesota. Our previews start on Tuesday, October 8th. We open on Saturday, October 12th, and we run through Sunday, November 10th.
Nice. It's a nice, healthy run.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And we're going to put all of that information in the notes of this episode so that if you are in the area, you can check it out. Or if you want to take a trip, because I recommend it because, I've, again, 2 for 2 now. I want to go to Minnesota and see these plays.
Honestly, I am completely in love with this institution. I have never been treated better by a theater. Their production staff is extraordinary. Yes, they're well-resourced, but I think more importantly, their artistry and attitude about how they use their resources is unmatched. They are so collaborative. I love working here, and everyone should come see. I think this theater should be a destination for families who want their kids to experience interesting art.
Period.
I
love it.
Yeah.
Jack Tamburri, I could sit and talk with you all day about apparently anything.
Well, listen, I'll be back in the New York area in a couple of weeks, and it is certainly our hope that a production of Drawing Lessons may be emerging back east over the next 2 years. So maybe we can be in touch.
That sounds like a plan.
Cool.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sitting and chatting with me. And I wish you nothing but the most fabulous things, which, I definitely see ahead for you.
Thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. I am sorry to Miss Martha, but I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Well, thank you so much. And I get the feeling that your chance will come.
I certainly hope so. Please give her my best, and I hope our paths cross again.
Indeed. Thank you, Jack. Full Circle is a Never Scared Productions podcast, hosted by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal, produced and edited by Never Scared, executive produced by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal. Our theme and music is by the Jingleberries. All names, pictures, music, audio, and video clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.